Hey, Mahara here. Just wanted to invite you to my brand new free masterclass that I'm going to be having on April 4th at 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. You can get the link to register in the show notes. This is a free masterclass and it's called Cultivate Your CEO Mindset. You will love it. I'll see you then. Welcome to the Art of Badassery, where I explore what it takes to live life on your own terms, break free from the status quo, and unleash your inner badass. Whether you're a rebel at heart or simply seeking inspiration to step outside your comfort zone, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Mahara Wayman, and each week I dive into the Welcome back to the Art of Badassery podcast. I'm your host, Mahara Wayman, and today I'm super jazzed. I have the most amazing guest with me. Her name is Jessica Burke. She is a West Coast Canadian dynamo, and I can't wait for you to meet her. She's a nature lover from Vancouver. Her journey from varsity basketball to corporate law took an unexpected turn. After transformative coaching sessions during her law career, she discovered some unexpressed gifts: empathy, compassion, and the ability to simplify complex ideas. Now, driven by a passion for youth empowerment, Jessica founded Rise Girl Coaching, bridging the gap for young females navigating life's challenges. Her vision: every girl empowered to navigate life authentically. No wonder she's a guest on my show today. Jessica, a part-time lawyer supporting female-founded startups, exemplifies a truly badass way to live. So join us as we unravel her story from sports to law, self-discovery, and empowering the next generation. Jessica, welcome to the show.
So happy to be here. Excited. Love your energy. Can't wait to be in community with you.
Oh, I'm excited too. I'm also excited that you're from, the West Coast because that's where I'm from. Most of you don't know that, but I'm from Vancouver. I now call Alberta home, but it was great. It's great to connect with a West Coast gal. Let's go back, if we can, to the beginning. You talked about in your bio to me your love of sports. What happened during that time of your life that sort of gave you a turn?
Yeah, so I grew up naturally. I was just an athletic girl and I loved sports. I found that was probably my first time that I felt in community. It was my first sense of belonging. Um, and it came relatively naturally to me. So I was lucky enough that, I worked hard at it, but by sort of grade 11, I knew that I could potentially play basketball at the university level, which was really exciting to me. Um, and my story with sport there actually took quite a turn right in my grade 12 year. At the very end, I'd gotten a full ride scholarship to the University of Alberta to play basketball. And I tore my ACL in the May of my grade 12 year playing for my school soccer team. So right away, going into this really exciting time for me, I was sort of had a few setbacks. Um, but I was just determined. I think honestly, sport had become a big part of my identity at that time. And I was determined to sort of fulfill that dream of mine to play at the next level. And it wasn't really in the cards for me. I ended up tearing my ACL again. I had 2 years at the University of Alberta just riddled with injuries. And then going into my third year, we got a new coach and they said, look, you can try out, but you've been injured on a full ride scholarship for 2 years. So I can't guarantee you a spot on the team. And that summer, I worked my butt off. I was training every single day. I went into tryouts. I got injured again because this body was not meant to play at that level. And I got cut from the team. And that was the first time I had a real sort of identity crisis related to sport because it had just been such a huge part of my life for so long. And it was taken quite quickly. And it was, not by choice on my end. Um, and I'll stop there on the sport front, but it was a huge part of my life, and I had to do some healing around it later. Now, my young daughters are playing basketball, and so I'm back into that community, and I love it, and I see so many positives from sport. But I think the piece of my story that I often reflect on is how much of it became a piece of my identity, and that's where I would have liked a little bit more space from it because it was who I was, right? Everything about me was wrapped up in it. So yeah, that was my sports story.
And that's a big story for us, whether it's sports or books or this or that. I think young girls especially
when we excel in something, we do put everything into that, and we do accept that that's our identity. And it's one of the challenges, is to your point, is when it's taken away. Who am I? How do I show up in the world if it's not on the court? How do I
Mhm.
show up in the world if it's not, as this particular person, or seen in this way? What did you do to get through that?
Well, interestingly, I didn't do a lot to go through it. And that's sort of that gap I saw. Like, wow, I really wished at that point I'd step back and say, well, what are my other gifts? I have a lot to offer outside of this achievement or this thing that I'm doing. But I actually quite quickly pivoted to just focusing on academics and then went into law school. I got good grades in university. My dad was a lawyer. It seemed like a safe choice for me. I remember at the time there was no particular reason why I wanted to go to law school, which I think shout out to anyone who's considering it. If you're not feeling a strong pull towards it at that time, just do the work to talk to people and make sure that that choice really is aligned with your strengths. But at the time, it just felt like a natural next step when I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. So I think I was a bit lost. And it almost was my next little identity badge was, oh, I'm going to go to law school and I'm going to be a lawyer. So I really didn't navigate that experience with a lot of practices of self-awareness. I sort of just moved on to the next natural goal. So that was going to law school.
But Jessica, can I just point out that you were quite young at the time? Um,
Yeah.
let's guys, I'm in my late 50s, and I am only just now beginning to have the self-awareness, the recognition, the badassery to actually question my choices, my feelings. So I just want to highlight that you were very young at the time. And of course, most people don't have that level of awareness when they're in university. But okay, so you decided to go into law because your dad's in law. It felt natural to you. How long into your law career did you question? Like, why did the coaching come into your law career? I'm curious.
So I think my nervous system told me within my first year of practicing law at a big firm in downtown Vancouver that it probably was not the right fit for me because I was not coping well with that high pressure, high stress environment. I actually loved law school, which fits for me because I'm a lifelong learner. I'm curious. I love learning things, but then the actual practice of law I found quite stressful. And I only stayed in a big firm for 1 year. And I remember saying to my now husband, I think that's it. I think I'm going to quit the law. This isn't for me. So I knew right away. But he had encouraged me to try some other ways of practicing. So, you can go in house, there's many different ways that you can show up in a legal practice. So I did end up going in house. And it wasn't until I had my daughters and I had enough time on a maternity leave to actually think about whether I wanted to be doing this for the rest of my life. Long story short, it took me 7 years to leave that sort of hustle and bustle of full-time practice of law. And what actually sparked it was I went on a women's retreat. It was sort of framed as like a leadership retreat for working women. I had a 1.5-year-old daughter at the time. And I just left that retreat with that deep knowing that, okay, I don't think law is for me, but what's my path going to be? And that was actually the hardest next step is like, if not this, then what? And so it took quite a long time for me to get some more clarity around that piece.
But I love hearing that you were courageous enough to ask yourself those questions, right? Because that's part of being a badass, is going, okay, I'm feeling something in my body. It's
Yeah.
either this clutch in my gut, or, my throat's tight, I can't talk, or, it could be worse than that, and it's actual illness. But it prompted you to ask those questions. And I just want to call out that that's pretty damn badass, especially in one so young. I'm curious though, when you started to, you said, my body told me. Can we just talk about that for a bit? Because so many of us ignore the signals in our body. And part of the coaching I do is somatic. So I'm very aware now that the body holds everything. People, the body does not forget. So
Mhm.
talk to us about when you started to feel it in your body, what that was like and what you did, what your next steps were.
Yeah, I think that there's so much wisdom in our bodies that we can either tune in and listen to or shut out. And so it's that act of saying, I'm feeling something, I want to tune into this, or I want to explore this a little bit more versus I want to push this feeling down or I want to escape this feeling. So for me, I think I was probably getting close to more of like a burnout state when I was in a big firm. And granted, I was a young associate, you know, I was learning how to be a lawyer. So there weren't a lot of expectations on me to be excelling, but I put those expectations on myself. So I would, you know, get an email and my whole body would go into a fight or flight response. So I really, that was sort of that nervous system dysregulation that I was feeling for things that didn't match what it probably should have felt like. It wasn't an email of you're going to get fired. It was like, here's a new piece of work. And I was like, oh, I can't handle this. So I was feeling that over and over. But interestingly, I sort of blamed myself in that experience too. It was like, oh, the narrative was, oh, you can't handle this, like you can't cope with this, versus this is a signal for you, like your body's telling you something, it's okay. Like there wasn't a lot of compassion there at that time. I sort of felt a bit like I was a failure in that I couldn't hack it in that environment. That was sort of what the narrative I was telling myself. But I will say it was a bit of a badass move to actually listen to it so early in my career and just say, I'm going to try something else. So I'm going to pivot. I did get a job in-house quite young in my legal career, which a lot of people wait a few years before making that transition. And I just said, I'm not attached to this path that's been set for me. I'm not attached to becoming a partner in this law firm. I'm just going to explore whether something else might feel better for me and ultimately better for my body, which really came out for me in stress and a bit of burnout. So I do think there was something there that I listened to it. I could have felt it and kept going. And there's a lot of statistics about the legal profession, which are not great, about how lawyers do repress that kind of thing and just keep grinding because that's the environment you're working in. So there's something to be said for just saying, hey, wait a minute, maybe I want to do this a bit differently.
I really appreciate that you said you chose the word attached, because so much of what we do comes from a misguided attachment. You know, we think that we can't change our minds,
Mm-hmm.
or I know I've spoken to some guests that were like, you know, I paid hundreds, like thousands and thousands of dollars for this education, or I borrowed for this education. I had to see it through, even though I hated it or I knew it wasn't for me. I had to see it through. I'm curious. You said your dad was a lawyer. How was he when you were sharing with him, or did you share with him, Dad, I don't know that this is for me? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so it was funny when I first told him I wanted to go to law school, he actually very honestly said to me, look, here's what you might experience as a woman in this profession if you want to have a family. Like this is the, because he also worked at a big firm. So he'd had a mixed experience himself. He wasn't like, go for it, girl, this sounds awesome. He was like, let me tell it to you straight. And then I think there was a bit of stubbornness in me. I was like, Dad, I'll show you. Like, I'm going to do it differently. You have no idea. So he was open to it. Like I did share with him that I wasn't loving it, but I think his story is one where he did stick in moments where he wasn't loving it. And he ultimately found his way, but it took him a really long time within the career to find something that was satisfying for him. So yeah, it can be hard sharing with him or even sharing with other colleagues who are still in the mix and either enjoying it or don't see that there's another path for them. It's always hard when you're that person who's sort of the first one taking that step to try something else.
Oh, total badass. And, you know, that's part of the challenge of stepping up and stepping into your life. So many
Yeah.
of us get, what's the word I'm looking for? Caught in a pattern, or caught in a career, or caught in a relationship that maybe on some level we know isn't serving us, but we don't have the tools, the wherewithal, the courage, or even the desire to look at something differently. So all of these things that you're saying, and for, you know, for our listeners, I hope you're nodding with me when I say it does take courage to question.
Mhm.
It really does take courage to question, and it takes courage to pivot. So you are in your career, you've left the big corporate giant, and you are in-house. When did you, after you go to the retreat, you're like, not quite sure this is for me. Is that when you started to take some coaching?
Yeah, that's when I said, okay, what's my next step after this retreat? Because I was just in a place of confusion, I think would be the right word. While I still had to show up into my job every day, I was shortly thereafter pregnant with my second daughter. So I was kind of just in the mix of life, but I knew I wanted to take a step to commit to some kind of change because I'd had that realization. So There has to be some action that you pair that with. Or I was ready for that anyway. So I did hire a career coach because I just didn't even know what it was that was missing. I just knew deep in my soul, like something was missing, but I couldn't even really articulate what it was. And so when I worked with a career coach, we just did what I now consider like basic practices. A lot of what I'm now trying to bring to the next generation is like, we did my core values. We looked at my strengths. Like it's very basic self-discovery stuff, but I had never done it. And I really remember thinking, why didn't I look at any of this earlier on? But that was my journey. I was meant to look at it then. But once I started investing in that process, I really had a lot of aha moments, and just having a safe container where I could bring my whole self and be like, look, here's what makes me feel super stressed. Like I wasn't sharing this with everyone or with friends. It was like that coach relationship was a place where I could just be authentically me. And she just helped reflect back what I think was already a knowing inside of me, but I just couldn't quite get there. And the big piece I knew that I was missing was that impact piece. And I'm a highly empathetic person. My work was really technical and more sort of sterile, and I was really missing that impact piece. So I did have some aha moments around, okay, so I know I want to make an impact. And then there's more self-discovery required of like, how do I want to do that?
So beautiful. What I'm hearing and what I think is important to stress is this journey of self-discovery never ends, right?
That's right.
So when you learn one thing, it opens up a door to learn something else. When you decide you want to have an impact in the world, then you go in this direction and you're like, well, what does that impact look like? And how do I get there? And why? And why is that impact so important to me? It's really quite fascinating. So, Jessica, what are some of the things that you now do today that you didn't do in the past, but you're like, how this is amazing. This is part of my routine. I'm curious.
Yeah, I have a pretty strong self-reflection practice. So for me, that looks like every night before bed, I have, and this is within motherhood and within entrepreneurship, but within motherhood, it's a little gratitude thing. I write one little memory of my kids every day because I find with motherhood, I just get caught up again, like in the doing and in the expectations and the shoulds, and it really grounds me into what matters to me within that. And I do that within my entrepreneurship too. So it's a really simple reflection practice. Like, what's one thing I'm proud of myself today about how I showed up? So that's something I've incorporated. And then for me, speaking about the somatic piece, I've had to work on calming my nervous system down. I think I was really conditioned to a state of a pretty chaotic state, and that just felt normal to me. But I was constantly getting sick. I was really worn down. I wasn't really showing up in a way that I felt proud of. And so healing my nervous system has looked like a consistent meditation practice. Getting out in nature. I know I'm this nature lover. Every time I'm in the forest, I'm calmer. So can I get into the forest more often? And can I do that in a way that has as very low barrier? Like just go stand in the forest for 5 minutes. Just go for a 5-minute walk. Things that feel accessible and there's a lot of this sort of pressure to do it a certain way or to do it for a certain length of time. And for me, it's been little tiny practices daily that help me go back to what I feel like is my true self and help give me some perspective on what's going on in life so I don't get caught back up into that sort of chaotic cycle that is more what I was used to in the past.
So we're going to take a short break right now, but I'll be back with my guest within 60 seconds. Ladies, unlock your inner badass and transform your life with my monthly subscription workshop. For just $47 a month, you'll have exclusive access to work closely with me, Mahara Wayman, as we dive deep into all things badass, from personal development to conquering your goals. Imagine waking up every day with confidence, purpose, and a smile that radiates your newfound strength. Take advantage of this badass opportunity and join us today at www.mindfulnesswithmahara.com and start your journey toward a happier, more confident you. Smile when no one is looking. You've earned it.
Such good information. And I really appreciate that you highlighted that it's the small things that we do on a regular basis that shape our future and shape our world. It's not necessarily the big, huge, ginormous things. And I talk about that quite a bit with my clients when we're talking about courage. you know, when you first ask someone in my world, when I first would speak to people about courage, they would immediately go to the big giant, you know, the big thing. It was courageous for me to move to a different country. Yes. But what about getting out of bed when you don't feel like it? As a mom, I think moms are the most courageous people on the planet because there are, I mean, I've got two children, girls, they're grown up now, but I remember having to pull myself out of bed in the middle of the night when one of them was crying. My husband's fast asleep. He never heard a thing.
Yeah,
And
but
all I wanted was for them to sleep through the night. I was so tired. But it takes courage to do and move and be when you don't feel like you can. But as a mom, we often do things that we don't feel that we can do because, you know, we're exhausted. So it's the little things, you know, it's the showing up when you're afraid. It's opening the email when your nervous system has clutched. It's telling your dad, I think maybe you were right. All of those things. There are lots of little ways that we show courage every day. And part of being badass is recognizing how courageous we already are. So a little bit of a side note there.
I actually love that because I recently was doing this sort of hot cold plunge thing, and there was a self-reflection component, and the guy was talking about the analogy he used was those moments when we're on the high dive. And he's like, so it takes so much courage to climb up there, and it takes courage to jump, and then you jump into the deep end and you're swimming, and it takes courage to be swimming. And I was like, that's so true. And he's like, what's your sort of deep end moment right now? And I was like, you know what, I can't pick one because I feel like if we make it small, then I'm being brave in every aspect in my life in some way, you know? And I think that also makes it more accessible because certainly the young women I work with, sometimes they feel like, oh, I have to discover my big passion and I have to make this big impact in the world. And then they feel a bit lost because they're not there yet. Right. Or even for me, I'm not knowing what I wanted to do. Well, I was already being brave, just showing up, how I was showing up in my family, that I was doing some self-discovery work, that I was committing to taking care of my body. Like, I think I love the way you reframe that to be like, there's bravery all around you. Like, let's notice where you're already being brave and then notice where you want to stretch a little bit more. But that there's like all these, for his analogy, deep ends or all these high diving boards that we're on. It helps pat ourselves on the back and be like, you're doing a great job. Just keep going.
Absolutely. One of the things the first things I did when I started on this journey was I began to write and I wrote quotes. And one of the quotes that I've written that I've referred to a lot in my practice is courage is a form of currency that pays dividends in the face of adversity.
Mm.
And I want my clients and my children and my friends to understand that if you can recognize all the moments that you've been courageous and brave, then when you really need it, you can go, yeah, I can do that.
100%.
Yeah. Oh, I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important. So thank you for recognizing that. I want to talk about your beautiful coaching practice, Rise Girl.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about that, how it came about and what it looks like?
Yeah. And part of my idea for Rise Girl was born out of my own experience with coaching and just saying, how do I get these skills into the hands of young women? Because I wish I had some of this. I wish I just had a container for this. The interesting thing about the young women I work with, and Rise Girl supports young women as early as sort of grade 7, 8 through to young adulthood. So I have clients who are in university and even some who are in their early career stages. But what we're often doing with those age groups is we're planting seeds. So I often think of my skill building practices as just seeds, and we're planting them. And what we have to mix it with is life experience. So I can tell you all the things and I can share all of my wisdom with the next generation. And if they don't go through an experience where they have to pull on that skill set and they have to put that into practice, it sort of just hangs there. It's like a seed that's not going to sprout. But I really do think when we're setting them up for success, that if we can plant some of those seeds of wisdom a little bit sooner, if we can support them with mentorship and community and belonging, then they can choose which seeds are important to them. They can choose which lived experiences they want to embrace. And my ultimate goal really is that they learn what their gifts are and then they share those gifts with the world sooner. So my story was one of, I had to go through that experience to sort of do the digging to figure it out. Is there a way that they can start digging a little bit earlier? That doesn't mean they're going to all know what they want to do when they're 22 years old. That's not realistic. But I think just like they're going to be more grounded in that sense of I know what is special about me, or I know something right now that's special about me, and I want to pursue that a little bit more. And so that really lights me up. I love that work, and I just love being in sessions with these young women. They're all so cool. Their energy is amazing. The next generation is so inspiring with the work and impact that they want to be making. And I think as the generation above them, or even a few generations above them, it really is our prerogative to say, okay, how can I put my hand out for you and help guide you along? How can I mentor you? How can I be in community with you and help you on this path? Because I've gone through that and I've learned, and I had women who supported me, right? So I just, it's my passion work. It lights me up, and I'm really grateful to be able to do it.
Well, I think what you're doing is amazing. And those of you that are listening, watch the video, because her energy just, I mean, she just started to glow when she talked about this. So I know it's your passion. And I agree with you. And it's so important that young women, especially, understand that they matter
Mhm.
and that they are enough. And I've learned through parenting my girls that when you give them permission to be themselves, beautiful things happen. But it's
Mhm.
not easy because, I'm just their mom, not just, I'm their mom, but they have to face dad, aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa, friends at school. I think the school system is, oh my
Yeah,
God.
your influences so
Oh,
conditioned. Like we're swimming in the waters of the patriarchy, so that's going to limit us right there, you know? Yeah, there's so many things stacked up against them that makes it complete sense that you want to play it safe. You just want to express yourself in a way that feels safe. But I think to your point, if you're a mom who's giving them that opportunity, you're a really important trusted adult in their life that's saying you can do this. And so the more of those that we have, the more likely they're going to try and take that scary step and see what those experiences are ahead for them.
absolutely. It's so important that we honor our children by preparing them.
Mm.
And it can be challenging as a parent because we've grown up in, as you said, a patriarchal system where you go to school and you do this and we're taught to do all of these things. And to your point, what I would love to see and what I'm so pleased to see in what you're doing is we are now teaching them to question,
Mm.
talk, and have a voice. And that is so, so powerful. So, Jessica, I just want to say thank you for doing this work because it's really needed. I am curious though, what, if anything, did you learn about yourself as a mom when you started Rise Girl Coaching?
Mm. So it's so interesting because my daughters are not in their teenage years yet, and a lot of the parents that I work alongside, if their daughter's interested in coaching, their girls are naturally in that stage where they are pushing away from their parents, and that's developmentally appropriate for them to be doing that. But I'm not in that stage yet with my kids. So I'm not trying to say, hey, I get it, I've been there, because I haven't. And I'm sure I was just watching a show the other night and there was a scene of a teenager with her mom, and I'm like, oh, can't wait. That looks really challenging. So what I try to do with my daughters really is just take some of this information and really microdose it down to something like I just shared on my Instagram a few weeks ago. I really believe in building self-trust. And so I have this little mini practice. It's called the inner wise girl practice. And it's just tapping into that side of yourself that has that sort of inner knowing. And with my daughters, my one daughter, Nora, she's always like, I don't know what popsicle flavor did. She was like, I'm just so torn up about this. And I'm like, okay, Nora, like, what's your wise girl saying? So just like try to micro dose it down to something that's a practice. Because what I think with a lot of the girls that I work with is we see them peak in confidence, and then puberty hits and we see a big drop, and we see all this, hormonal changes and peer changes and all these things they're going through, and they kind of forget what makes them amazing. And then I think our job is to just slowly start reminding them of that. So it's like almost a coming back to yourself. It's not like you never had this skill and you need to rebuild it. It's almost like a remembering. And so my dream with my daughters is that they don't forget as much. They're going to forget a bit of it, and that's totally fine. But that I can help guide them along that in a way that they can stay connected to that inner piece of themselves and that inner wise girl. But being an entrepreneur is a trip. I'm so grateful that I have the work-life flexibility to be able to be there for my kids in the way that I want to, that works for me. So ultimately, I think it's just a blessing that I've gotten into a career path that I can do that.
Oh, it sounds amazing. And I want to highlight when you said it's a remembering. because I agree 100%. You can look back at your kids, and like I do, and I talk about this quite a bit with my friends, is when our kids are little, they are so close to their spiritual side.
Yes.
They're so close to their higher self. They're very, very wise, because I believe we're spiritual beings having a human existence. And as we get older, based on the society that we've born into, we often forget, like we forget who we are really deep down inside. So I like that you brought up this idea of remembering, you don't have to rethink, the wheel, because you actually already are whole. You actually were born enough. And
Yeah.
when you give yourself permission to sometimes forget what you've been taught, let it go if it doesn't serve you, it's that much easier to get to the core of you, which is beautiful, whole,
Yeah,
all-knowing,
that
all-loving.
essence. And like when you talk about being a badass and what those gifts are for each of us, we're born with those. Like that essence of who we are is there. And it's so hard to learn how to express it and to feel safe expressing it, but it's there. It's
It's the
always
feeling safe to express it. I'm so glad that you said that. And I, I, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not that I worry. I wish things were different, but we are all on our own journey, and we all have a different path to take. But learning to express our feelings is such a powerful, if there's only one thing that my kids could learn, it's learn to express your true feelings, learn the language.
yeah.
I remember I used to really annoy one of them when I'd say, "So what exactly are you feeling?" "I'm pissed off." That's all I know. That's the word I know. And I'm like, okay, I'll take that word.
Yeah.
You know,
We can work at that.
there's lots of great words out there. And I mean, I'm tongue in cheek, I'm making fun of it, but really, our language is powerful. And when we take the time and give ourselves permission to learn, am I feeling embarrassed or disappointed? I am I feeling shame? Like, what am I really feeling when my body clutches when I look at the computer and I see I have a new email? Is it fear? Is it, whatever? You sort of go down that rabbit hole. And that's why coaches are great, because we give our clients permission to explore. But I love that you are giving your children permission to explore. And I think what you're doing, the work of empowering young females to do this work, is also so, so, so needed. Tell us about anything that you've got for the future coming up with either your business or your law practice, because I see that you're still practicing part-time law with female founded startups, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah. I always joke that I'm practicing part-time, which is just the right amount for me because full-time wasn't the right amount for me. But I also love that I can do the pieces of law that I really do still feel like are impactful. And now that I'm in an entrepreneurial community, there's people that need help with really basic stuff, just getting templates and services agreements and things like that set up for their business. So I am doing that, though I don't do a lot of business development around it. Whatever comes in is meant to come in. And then my work with Rise Girl right now, I have my one-to-one coaching practice, which I have 2 spots available in the new year for that practice. I have my group container, which is what's called my Elevate Leadership Program, and I run that a few times a year. And I do that for this upcoming one. I'm actually running for grades 8 to 10 and grades 11, 12, whereas I used to focus just on the older age group. But I've had more and more moms come to me and say, hey, is there something that you could do for the grade 8, 9, 10 age group, just as like a foundational skill set? I think that there's a real demand to build that emotional resilience, and even like you were saying, that emotional agility of just like understanding yourself within the context of the high school experience, which is challenging. So I'm running that. My next intake for that one will be in March. And then I do workshops. So I work with organizations who support young women. So I go in person and run workshops for them. But yeah, you can check me out on Instagram. I'm at Rise Girl Coaching, RIZEGIRL Coaching. And that's usually the best way to connect with me.
Beautiful. Well, I will put everything in the show notes because I want people to connect with you. I am curious though, when you talk about mothers coming or parents coming to you asking for something, how do they know of you? I'm Canadian. I'm from Vancouver. I'm just curious. How do you get to talk to these parents? Do you go to the school first?
Yeah, so a lot of the work I do at the high school levels, I'll try to connect in with a PAC, a parent advisory council within the school. And sometimes that's just running a free workshop so that they can see what the skill set is all about. I think sometimes when you're already in the coaching space, you don't realize that many people have not had exposure to, they don't even know what coaching really is. They understand maybe what therapy is, but they don't always understand what coaching is. And so what I've seen is that there's a huge need for sort of child psychologists they have huge wait lists. Like it can take 6 months to a year to get in. And obviously if a young girl is in, a certain level of pain that they need a therapeutic intervention, then that's the path for them to go. But there's a lot of that proactive work that we can do. And that's what I was seeing from moms. Honestly, it's often moms who have already gone through a little bit of coaching themselves later in adulthood. And they're like, I see the power of this, similar to my story. How do I give my girls some of these skills? And then that's when they'll search and find me. Often too, it's just referrals from my network of people I already knew who are in the corporate space or things like that. But I do my best to sort of get the word out on the street. But yeah, I think often the pattern I do see is women who have experienced the benefits of coaching and want some of that for their daughters.
Oh, that's so exciting. That's beautiful to hear. Jessica, I have loved chatting with you. And as I mentioned before, we're both from Vancouver. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with our audience today about your journey of badassery? Because just to recap, you had some big disappointments when you were a young athlete in university. You pivoted, took on a legal career, and were brave enough to check in with yourself that this wasn't actually what you wanted. And you made some changes there, and now you're an entrepreneur helping young women. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with us?
I would just say, like, I love that you have given this podcast the frame of this badass concept. And what I would just love for each of the listeners to walk away with is a little bit of a self-reflection on where have I already been a badass? Let's take the career trajectory, because that's a big storyline for me, is like, where have I already pivoted, or where have I already tried a new opportunity within my career that I was badass, and where do I want to do that a little bit more? I think it's that, again, like we were saying, that journey back to yourself requires you to be courageous, but it requires that seed of awareness. So just take a minute to look inside yourself and say, hey, where do I want to step into my authenticity and my power a bit more on a career front? And how could I take a small baby step? For me, that first baby step was like, I'm going to hire a career coach, but how do I take a small baby step towards actually embracing that journey for myself? And as you importantly said, like, how do I reflect on how I've already done that? Because I think that's that grounding in our own worthiness and knowing like we're all doing awesome already. But if you're feeling that longing, how can you take one little small action towards pursuing something in that direction?
Very powerful. Aligned action towards your goal.
Mm-hmm.
It's priceless. Truthfully, it's absolutely priceless.
Yeah.
Jessica, thank you for chatting with us today on your show. Love your story and really, really love what you're doing with your business. Listeners, have an amazing week, and I hope you'll tune in next week on The Art of Badassery when I chat with somebody new. My name is Mahara. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to The Art of Badassery. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and gained valuable insights to help unleash your inner badass. If you found this podcast helpful, please leave a rating or review on your favorite platform. Your feedback not only helps me improve the show, but it also helps others like yourself discover the podcast. Until next time, keep embracing your authenticity and living life on your terms. Here's to you.